Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again on this beautiful Wednesday evening out here in Johannesburg. Tonight being Wednesday night in conversation with myself, Inayet Wadee. And as we have been doing in the last 23 months, we are staying with Palestine and as developments unfold. The latest being the recognition of Palestinian statehood. And once again, we are witnessing as this genocide unfolds, and we've seen the slaughter continue and the true death toll running into hundreds of thousands. And as Israel continues its policy of systematic starvation, producing this man-made famine as well, and the forcibly expulsion of millions of people from Gaza City in the north with no intention of having them ever returning again. At the same time, we see in the West Bank fascist settlers who have been systematically expanded, where we've seen Israel systematically expanding their presence under the protection of Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government. Now, this is the reality, and we have now seen suddenly the recognition of a two-state solution, the recognition of Palestine, and this has come under criticism. In fact, a lot has been said, a lot has been written, and one of my guests tonight, Professor Ziyaad Motala, who is a professor of law at Howard University School of Law, has written a wonderful piece. I think many of us have already seen it here in South Africa, trending on social media as well. We will be discussing the contents of this piece that Prophet Ziyaad Motala has written. And also we have in our company this evening, Saleh Hijazi, who is a Palestinian BDS movement activist. So let's welcome on screen both our guests, Professor Ziyaad Motala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome and jazakallah khairan so much for your time.
Wa alaikum salam. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Yes, and to you as well, Saleh Hijazi. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to you as well.
Wa alaikum salam. Very happy to be with you tonight.
Yes, Prof. Ziyaad, let's begin with you. And obviously, we've seen how this genocide has unfolded over the last 23 months. You've written this piece, and suddenly we've seen all these countries now getting together, recognizing Palestine as a state. But again, what we've seen over a period of time is as this genocide is in its final stages against the people in Gaza in particular, we see these imperialist powers who are now attempting to wash away Palestinian blood in which they personally have been drenched.
Yeah. So, Inayet, I think the central problem with the way recognition has been framed lies in its deliberate vagueness. Recognition in itself is not a neutral act, but depends on what is being recognized. Without clear reference to the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the Palestinian capital, without enforceable security guarantees against Israeli aggression, and a firm commitment to sanction Israel if it refuses to acknowledge Palestinian sovereignty, recognition becomes little more than a gesture. Now, there hasn't been comment on what I consider to be a perverse side to this. Under international law, Israel has never had the right to invoke self-defense. I mean, we've heard this narrative over 2 years from Western countries and commentators in the West that Israel is engaged in legitimate self-defense.
Yes, I think Prof has frozen for some reason. Saleh, I think while we still try and get Prof back, I think just the question that I had raised, and I think Prof was actually alluding to a disgusting display of imperialist hypocrisy as far as the recognition of this two-state solution goes. Because, when one looks at the various heads of states, when one looks at their statements, when one looks at the announcements that they have been making, talking about a historic step to establishment of peace in the Middle East, yet these are the very same governments that avoided even the term genocide like it was a plague.
Well, not only that, dear sir, these governments, especially the UK and France, have been culprits in the ongoing genocide. As we speak, Israel continues the world's first live stream genocide with the active support of the United Kingdom, for example. So, in the best case scenario view, this recognition is symbolic and meaningless. In reality, it distracts from the number one priority, which is to end the genocide, the number one priority to end complicity in Israel's systematic atrocity crimes, including the genocide in Gaza, the apartheid against all of the Palestinian people across the Palestinian geography, as well as Palestinian refugees who continue for more than 77 years now being denied their inalienable right to return to their homes that they were expelled from by Zionist forces and later the Israeli army in the Nakba of 1947 till 1949. What this recognition does in reality is recognize the Bantustan reality. I'm speaking to you from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. The area in which I live right now is completely closed, surrounded by Israeli settlements, settlement infrastructure, including roads, which I'm not allowed to use or get onto. It's actually very dangerous for me to do so, and gates that have existed for many years, and checkpoints to segregate between us and the illegal settlements, but also now new installations of gates that separate Palestinian communities from each other. So my family, my friends in Nablus, in Jenin, in Hebron, in Jerusalem, and so on, I cannot reach right now. If I leave Ramallah, I'll find all the gates surrounding the city now closed, particularly because it's a Jewish holiday of a new year, where, as Israel does usually on these holidays, is a complete closure of these Bantustans. And to go back to my main point, what this recognition, particularly by these states, because we have to remember this is the last wave of recognition. Right? You have the vast majority of the UN member states recognizing Palestine. The countries of the global south have recognized the state of Palestine for a very long time. Palestinians declared the state in 1947. It was called Hukumat Amun Palestine. It was declared from Gaza across the geography of Palestine. So this is the last wave, but it comes from the colonial West, and it comes to distract from the priority to end the genocide, from the priority to dismantle apartheid, and also to cover up their direct complicity in Israel's atrocity crimes.
Yes, Prof, I know we lost you. I think, if you could just continue, where
Yeah.
we lost you. So please continue.
Yeah, let me.
Yes, I think we certainly are having a bit of a problem as far as Professor is concerned. We need to apologize.
Technology is working against the professor this evening.
I know he's in Poland at the moment, so I'm not too sure, what the network is like. So we need to apologize. But, once again, Saleh, I think when one looks at the response of Benjamin Netanyahu to these statements that have been made by these various governments who are now calling for Palestinian statehood again, Netanyahu has made it very, very clear that there will be no Palestinian state west of the Jordan River. We know what Smotrich has said. He's called for the annexation of the West Bank as a necessary response. So, with these declarations that are coming through, and once again, it's a cynical maneuver, I would say, on the part of some of these European imperialist powers, when statements like these are made, where on the one hand you're calling for statehood, yet you are not criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu. You are not taking on this fascist imperialist occupier, the Zionist occupier, and also holding them accountable for making these statements. But I think before we get this, Saleh, before we lose Prof again, Prof is back with us.
My profound apologies. I have no idea why I am kicked out and then back again. Western leaders are quick to clothe themselves in the language of justice, whilst ensuring nothing changes. Britain, Canada, and Australia's recent recognition of Palestine, and followed yesterday by France and a number of other countries, clearly is a case in point. All of them have proclaimed this as historic, but it's hedged with duplicity, vagueness, and the conspicuous absence of accountability for Israel's indicted leaders. And the point that I made in my article is that these recognitions were less about Palestinian sovereignty than about placating angry electorates, condemning Hamas whilst excusing Israeli impunity. And the result is recognition without consequence. Timidity that revealed the West's peculiar genius for congratulating itself whilst doing nothing. And I don't know if I'm still on or if I've been kicked off.
No, continue, Prof. We can hear you. Continue.
Yeah, okay. Now, I was saying that there is a potential perverse side to this particular recognition. And the point that I was making before I got kicked out is that under international law, Israel has never had the right to self-defense in terms of defending occupation. All right? And the idea and the narrative put out there by so many Western leaders that Israel has a right to self-defense is clearly not consistent with international law, because you don't have a right to defend illegal occupation. Now, the problem is that with partial or hollow recognition, this could hand Israel a new weapon. If Israel can point to a truncated parcel of land, and none of the states have emphatically stated that we're talking about Palestine in terms of the 1967 borders. As a matter of fact, Britain has hedged conspiracy.
Oh, well, we must apologize, really. I see Prof has been kicked out for some reason or the other. I think, Saleh, let's just get back to the issue that we were talking about. And, again, I mentioned against the background of the statements that were made by both Netanyahu and Smotrich as well. And once again, the silence on the part of many of these governments, rather than, and again, it's a test of sincerity on the part of these European colonialist powers, once again, calling for statehood. But when statements like these made, they say they remain silent.
Not only silent, they are complicit. So these statements, and this is something that we have to be very clear about, that these statements come on the back of action that Netanyahu, Smotrich, this government, and the previous governments are taking on the ground, making the Palestinian state on the 1967 borders impossible. I'll tell you, this islands, Smotrich published a map a few weeks ago that display his vision for how the West Bank looks like. And the map shows a number of islands. Hebron, Bethlehem is completely taken by Israel, annexed. Ramallah, a bit around Salfit and Tulkarem area, Jenin and Nablus. Small islands that are surrounded by apartheid Israel. Dear brother, in reality, this is what it is right now. I tell you, when I travel across the West Bank, if I can and when I can, when apartheid Israel opens the gates for me and allows me to travel across the land, I travel in a sea of illegal settlements, illegal settlement infrastructure, and what apartheid Israel has imposed on the ground. They are expanding roads like never before. They're developing the segregated water infrastructure like never before. In the summer, over the last couple of years, in normal times, Palestinians in cities like Ramallah would get water once a week. This is when Israel opens the tap for us, and we get water once a week. We fill tanks up on the roofs that allows us to have water for a week until it comes back again. Over the last 2 summers, we got 35% only of that one day. And the reason is because The development that has been going on the infrastructure of the settlements has meant that they had to take away more of the water and cut some of the water that is coming from or going to the Palestinians. So, these statements you have to look at as an expression of something that is already existing on the ground, not something that Netanyahu and Smotrich or this government will still do. They are doing it. They have been doing it. And I think the most important point here is that they have been doing it with the complicity and support of these states that have come with the recognition of Palestine now. The UK, France, Australia, and to a lesser degree, Spain and Portugal and so on. And I say to a lesser degree because there are still links of complicity, but the Spanish government has indicated that it wants to uphold its obligations under international law and sanction Israel. More recently, it has done some work to challenge, for example, the EU-Israel Association Agreement, along with Ireland and so on. And so we have a number of states that are attempting to take meaningful action when it comes to Palestine. But it is not the UK and France. The French were hosting, this two-state conference at the same time of sending weapons to Israel. This is not only hypocritical, this is beyond, this is absurd.
Yes, in fact, I actually want to come to the whole involvement with French together with Saudi Arabia as well. But just looking at it from a Palestinian perspective as well, Saleh, how do you see this recognition of the Palestine state? I mean, because this is clearly a watershed moment, but a watershed moment for further betrayal of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. How do you as a Palestinian see this? Do you see it as betrayal?
Look, for us, the watershed moment is that moment on the 18th of September, when Israel has missed the deadline that was given to it by the overwhelming majority of states around the world in a General Assembly resolution in September of last year to end its illegal presence, according to the International Court of Justice. It has missed that deadline while it continues to carry out a genocide in Gaza. The watershed moment is marked by that, by Israel's defiance of international law and of the will of the vast majority of the international community. It is also a watershed moment in that it shows the failure of states to uphold their obligations under international law, not to recognize an illegal situation that was created by Israel, and not to render any aid or assistance to it. This is very clear. The ICJ made it very clear in its advisory opinion from last year. So this is for us the watershed moment. Is it now that states are going to live up to their obligations, and in doing so, end the genocide, end Israel's illegal occupation and apartheid, and at the same time uphold the multilateral system that is based on the rule of international law? Or are we ushering in, like Israel has been trying to do over the last couple of years, a might makes right era, not only in this region, but across the world? So what is a watershed is not the recognition. Look, for Palestinians, and let me be very, very clear and direct here. Palestinians, Palestine is a land from the river to the sea. Our struggle is a struggle for self-determination for all 14 million Palestinians. 7 million of us in colonized Palestine, and the other 7 million who are in forced exile. Our struggle is for self-determination and the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes. These recognitions do not contribute to the fulfillment of the objectives of our struggle.
Yes, but also I think let's just come back to the whole issue surrounding France, which you alluded to earlier as well. And again, when one looks at this New York Declaration that was led by both France and Saudi Arabia, but all along, as you mentioned, they've done absolutely nothing to stop the slaughter that is taking place. And also at the same time, they are seeking what is called political cover, to reach some sort of an accommodation or a compromise with the Zionist regime, and to serve as partners. And again, what is critical is this drive to even possibly restructure the entire region.
So what I see about what has been called the French-Saudi two-state solution conference that has led to the New York Declaration to be drafted in July and then later adopted by the General Assembly, is that this was mandated by the General Assembly. It was mandated in Resolution ES 1024, which was passed on the 18th of September of 2024, last year. Resolution 1024 adopts the International Court of Justice advisory opinion that determines that Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territories, meaning both the military occupation and illegal settlements, is illegal and must be ended as rapidly as possible, as well as reaching the conclusion that Israel is guilty of apartheid against Palestinians. This is the highest judicial body. The General Assembly adopts that resolution on the 18th of September. It calls for sanctions, military embargo, trade sanctions, and other measures to be taken against Israel and those perpetrators of crimes. The same General Assembly resolution mandated an organizing of a high-level conference on the question of Palestine and the two-state solution. This is what France and Saudi Arabia then took initiative to do. Now, why I say it's hypocritical is because now this one bit of this very important and historic resolution from the General Assembly has come to be the number one priority. So rather than actually prioritizing the vital bits of the General Assembly resolution, which is that Israel must end its illegal presence in 12 months, and that states have an obligation not to recognize or render aid or assistance to Israel's violations of international law, and they must impose a military embargo and trade embargo and sanctions against perpetrators. Now, all of this was put aside for the prioritization of a conference on the two-state solution in the New York Declaration. Now, this is what I find hypocritical in a way where, again, Western states are seeing their ways of deviating away from their complicity in Israel's crimes and the real struggle here, which is the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and the right of Palestinian refugees to return.
Yes. Prof. Ziyaad, I think just to follow up from what Saleh has been saying, and I know you've been listening in terms of the complicity and providing cover for Israel and its genocide that it is carrying out at this point in time. But what we're also finding is in proposing and calling for Palestinian statehood, the blame game, and once again making Hamas chiefly responsible, asserting the pervasive threat of Hamas, terrorism to Israel, and at the same time, saying that Hamas is the main barrier to a two-state solution.
Yeah. So let me pick up on the points that Brother Saleh laid out, and I think is absolutely correct. Recognition without borders, recognition without guarantees and consequences risks being entirely illusory. Instead of advancing Palestinian sovereignty, it's going to entrench a Bantustan model where Palestinians are corralled into fragments of land, and any resistance to the ongoing dispossession is branded as a war against Israel. What looks like progress may perversely become the very tool that Israel uses to further legitimize the indefensible. So that's absolutely important. I mean, without saying what it is that you're recognizing, it really becomes extremely problematic. Yes, if we take a look at all three recognitions that came a couple of days ago, every one of them in some way, shape, and form referred to Hamas. And undoubtedly that has been the narrative over the last 2 years in terms of reducing the entire atrocities to Hamas. But I think the reality is that the facts on the ground in terms of the electorate has changed dramatically. This narrative of putting everything onto Hamas and reducing what Israel is doing as a consequence of Hamas does not carry any credence among significant sectors of the population in those countries, and that is a major contributing factor in terms of the powers that be changing their stance and moving towards this recognition, albeit this recognition that is clouded in vagueness. If I can pick up on another point that Brother Saleh had referred to, when we talk about recognition and when we talk about statehood, international law operates in terms of two cardinal principles. Number one is the principle of sovereignty, and the second principle is the principle of equality. Now, what these countries need to do is to emphasize emphatically that with that recognition comes also the recognition of Palestinian sovereignty, meaning that the Palestine government is the sole determinant with regard to whatever occurs on Palestinian territory, be it the land, be it the airspace, be it the territorial sea, and that any attempt by Israel or any other country to short circuit their sovereignty constitutes a violation of international law. I think that emphatic statement would have gone a long way in terms of giving teeth to this recognition. And in that regard, I mean, a statement along the lines, we all know the flotilla that's making its way towards Gaza. If you attach your recognition to a statement that says we recognize Palestinian sovereignty over Gaza, this would then mean that any attempt on the part of Israel to intervene and circumvent any exercise of sovereignty but by a Palestinian entity would constitute a violation of international law. I don't know if I'm still on. Am I still on?
Yes, go ahead, Prof.
Yeah, and the second principle is the principle of equality of states, meaning that Palestine exercises the same equality in the international community of states as every other country in terms of its participation in international organizations, in terms of its participation in treaties, in terms of its participation in international organizations. If it came with those pronouncements, then it would have teeth, basically saying that we recognize both internal sovereignty as well as external sovereignty, and linking it to borders, specifically the 1967 border, without leaving any ambiguity that Israel can come down sometime along the line and say, okay, we recognize Palestine, but this is the truncated territory that we are only recognizing. And if you attempt to fight for anything more, we will now consider that to be an aggression, and we have a right to self-defense. And that pretty much creates a whole host of additional problems, which one would have hoped that the recognition would have obviated.
Yes, Prof. But also, Saleh, in creating these additional problems, and I think what is absolutely important, as you alluded to earlier as well, you've got the Zionist, imperialist occupier controlling what you termed as a Bantustan, where on the one hand, you're going to have a population that would be disarmed and left entirely once again at the mercy of a Zionist regime that is armed to its teeth. Because this is exactly what it is. And this is the reason why I raised this question about Hamas, because we've heard even Keith Starmer make a statement saying Hamas has no future, they have no role in government, they have no role in security, they've prescribed and sanctioned Hamas as well. And again, we see, Hamas obviously featuring very, very prominently in many of these statements, as Prof. Ziyaad also alluded to. Everyone made a statement. But yeah, again, this raises a question, and we know a few months into this genocide, there was this attempt to unite Palestinians under a common banner as well. Now, again, how united are the Palestinians in their opposition to these latest proposals of a Palestinian state with the two-state solution?
Look, for Palestinians, on the ground and reacting to, seeing, hearing these developments, but then seeing them and experiencing through the prism of what happens on the ground. The test here, just to add also to what Professor Ziyaad has laid out in terms of kind of the law and sovereignty and principles of statehood. The test is the ability to exercise our right to self-determination. This is the main test. I mean, it's both kind of a legal test, but also a test of what is happening on the ground and whether these recognitions mean anything at all. Or if you want to have, then a critical view, how do they contribute even to a lesser ability for us to exercise our right to self-determination? The right to self-determination is a right. It is not something that is requested and granted by others. It's natural. It's guaranteed in international law. With these recognitions, the question is, are we even a degree more able to exercise this right, or are we further away from it? What Israel does on the ground is push us further away from it. This recognition has not brought us any closer or has put any obstacles in front of Israel in its violation of Palestinian right to self-determination. This is the test. This is the test. And then again, I want to bring back kind of to the point, because I think this is, this must be at the core of the matter, that these states have complicity in Israel's ongoing atrocity crimes, whether it is the live stream ongoing genocide against 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied and besieged Gaza Strip, or it is the a criminal apartheid regime over the entire territory, from the river to the sea, and against Palestinian refugees who are denied the right of return, or the illegal occupation, including the criminal settlement enterprise in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. This is the complicity of these states in this entire kind of criminal regime, the Zionist settler colonial criminal regime, is at the heart of the matter. And so this recognition comes also to distract away from this. It distracts away from Britain still actively, its military is active in the genocide that is going on in Gaza. As I was saying before, France was sending weapons to Israel at the same time that it was organizing that two-state conference. France, the UK, and Australia are part of this network of intelligence. They're called the Six Eyes, that are actively collaborating and are complicit in Israel's military and security that enforces the apartheid and genocide in Gaza, and so on and so forth. And we can go into the different kinds of complicity that these states either directly have, whether it is in the military and security support, the shielding from accountability of Israel, providing it with diplomatic cover, or, for example, the allowing of companies that are domiciled in their jurisdictions to continue their support as well and complicity in Israel's atrocity crimes. So there are these various levels of complicity, and these countries have not done one bit to end it, while they come and they try to make this facade of state recognition to hide away from that and to allow Israel really to continue basically with its policies of genocide, apartheid, and illegal occupation on the ground.
Yes, Prof. Ziyaad, this is exactly the point.
If I can add to that,
okay.
The right to self-determination is a higher norm of international law. And the right to self-determination means a people will choose their own representatives. A foreign power cannot choose who represents them. We encountered this phenomenon in South Africa. For many decades, the apartheid government said that they would not negotiate with the liberation movements, and they handpicked the leaders that were acceptable to them, namely the homeland leaders and the other puppets, and attempted to cut a deal with them, and it had no credibility. They characterized the liberation movements as terrorists and Marxists and all kinds of other epithets. But under the right to self-determination, a people will choose their own leadership and who represents them. And that's fundamental to our understanding of self-determination. The second point, Inayet, is your part with regard to a Palestinian entity being disarmed. Now, the right to self-defense is a fundamental norm of international law. It's not just a fundamental norm of international law, but it's a peremptory norm of international law that has the highest status. The technical term that international law uses for the right to self-defense is it's a just cogans norm. And what that denotes is that no foreign state can handicap another state in terms of its ability to defend itself. Now, we saw this phenomena play itself out in Bosnia. When Bosnia became an independent state, the United Nations Security Council had imposed a comprehensive arms embargo against all of the former states in Yugoslavia, resulting in Bosnia unable to procure arms, even though they were a victim of an armed attack. And everyone overwhelmingly came to the consensus that Bosnia was a victim of aggression on the part of Serbia, and that by virtue of kneecapping them and preventing them from procuring arms, and countries that wanted to aid them could not do so because of the United Nations Security Council resolution, a number of international scholars at the time, I wrote a very long piece that documented, based on international law, that was a violation of a peremptory norm of international law. So any suggestion that you're going to have a sovereign Palestinian state and you're going to now truncate that sovereignty in terms of their ability to really exercise power, it really constitutes a violation of international law. And we need to call it out and be very, very emphatic in terms of saying that Palestine, again, as a sovereign equal among the international community of states, will participate as an equal and exercise its sovereignty with all of the rights that any sovereign has under international law. So that also should be a non-starter.
Yes, and also I think, Saleh, I think what is important to understand is how important the international bodies are. And I know you spoke about the UN General Assembly, but also the UN Security Council as well, because, there also what we've seen is actually it's exposed hypocrisy to a large extent as well. Obviously the United States using its veto powers over and over again as well to protect Israel as well. So and also many of these countries that are now calling for Palestinian statehood, again ignoring rulings by the likes of the ICJ, the ICC as well, the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, still shaking hands, still welcoming people from the Zionist regime into their countries as well. So no amount of diplomatic maneuvering on the part of these imperialist countries can actually do anything, but also at the same time, it can't even bring an end to the genocide and, to add insult, now they are talking about preserving the rights and the existence of the very people, the Palestinian people who have been, brutally genocided, who've been brutally slaughtered over this period of time.
Let me answer this question in kind of like three parts. First, when thinking about the UN, which is under perhaps an existential, I think, challenge at the moment, I'm reminded of a saying by South African jurist John Dugard, who maybe a decade ago already said that Palestine is the litmus test for the international order of human rights and law since the Second World War. That was true then. It is even more true and urgent as a question, as a test right now. And we indeed see that reflected in what you have just laid out, sir, about the impotence of the Security Council, the inability of the General Assembly even to take action when the Security Council is paralyzed by the veto of one country, the United States, that is a culprit in Israel's genocide, apartheid, and settler colonialism. And it is now up to the overwhelming majority of member states to decide whether this institution, the UN, is an institution that still has any meaning, and where actually peace and security, it was set up, to preserve the peace and security, global peace and security, whether it is actually an institution that allows states to be able to get to peace and security, or it's an institution that is working to serve whenever that is whenever it is needed, the interest of the colonial West and the imperial US. So it's a real question, and I hope to see this question addressed in the speeches of heads of states, particularly from the global South. We've heard it in the last General Assembly high-level week, which is ongoing right now as we speak, when a number of countries, including Indonesia, Malaysia, South Africa, Colombia, have addressed the hypocrisy and the double standards of the international community, particularly of the global West. So this is one, and I think, and the test is very, very urgent. The second, I think, and this is again something that has been alluded to by these world leaders that have highlighted the hypocrisy and double standards, particularly Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, when as early as November 2023, a month into the genocide, has said that the genocide in Gaza is a rehearsal for what is to come on all of us. And indeed, we see the US acting without any kind of consequence, without even trying to justify, for example, the bombing of ships off the Venezuelan coast. That genocide will become the order of the day. So if you have the power, if you have the might, if you have the strong military, you can do as you like, and there will be no consequences at all. It's the rule of the jungle. It is the might makes right paradigm. And yes, Palestinians, and particularly our brothers and sisters in Gaza, are on the front lines of the struggle, but it is all of us, and it includes all of us, that if we don't right now stand up for what is right and what is justice, a rule of international law, we will very quickly see the Gaza model basically copied in many different places around the world. Whenever anybody dares to stand up for oppression and domination by the US empires and its allies, they'll be crushed, and there'll be no questions asked. We seriously face this threat. The third thing I want to say, just to end, that while we are seeing an action by the UN and by multilateral institutions, the best that we're saying are commitments. We are seeing some very significant actions taken by some states. Colombia is one, Malaysia is another one, even South Africa, despite continuing to send call to Israel, the case at the International Court of Justice remains a very important milestone for the struggle for justice and freedom in Palestine, but also for the struggle for the rule of international law globally and against genocide anywhere it may exist. So there are still those that are trying to challenge, maybe not in multilateral institutions like the UN, at a national level, but these are still important, and they've come together most recently in the formation of the Hague Group that was launched in January and again made the Bogota declarations in July of this year.
Yes, Prof, I know you've got to leave us in a few minutes, and just before you take leave of us, my question would be, are Palestinian lives so cheap? Why must Palestinians accept this gauntlet that has been orchestrated by the very people that have been, and governments who have been in collaboration with Israel, whether it comes to them being directly, indirectly, being complicit in this genocide, collaborating with Israel in terms of security, in terms of intelligence, and all these countries are the same countries that are recognizing the state of Palestine. They've been allies of Israel They've allowed Israel to exist for a long time as a rogue state, as a pariah state, despite all the violations under international law and also humanitarian law.
Yeah. Inayet, one has to, in answering that question, look at the way Western governments operate. And in that regard, specifically the United States. When we take a look at the way politics in the United States is conducted, it's fair to say that money determines the way political actors work. This operates in pretty much most Western countries, but it's really operates on steroids in the United States. The adage, if money talks, I'm listening, and that's the way the politicians operate in the United States. The Zionist lobby historically has been one of the most powerful lobbies in the United States, supporting political candidates and supporting opponents of political candidates that do not toe their line with enormous financial resources in terms of influencing the outcome of elections. And that historically has been a powerful factor in terms of the way political actors have toed the line. But what we are now beginning to see is a rupture in that regard. The traditional media is not the only show in town. We have alternative media in terms of media platforms, not legacy media, that influences particularly the younger generations in very significant ways, and in that regard significantly influences their behavior. And it is that same phenomena that has influenced the younger generation and others in so many Western countries to take to the streets in protest. Trade union members, whether it's in Italy, dock workers in Genoa, pretty much saying that we will not handle goods that is destined for Israel, and other European countries in terms of influencing them. So the reality is that has been a powerful factor, but we're beginning to see cracks, and we're beginning to see significant cracks in that support for Israel occurring. If you take a look at the United States, opinion polls suggest, and these are establishment opinion polls, 70% of the Democratic Party voters support Palestine. 30% are still firmly entrenched in support of the Zionist entity. So that in itself is extremely, extremely revealing. If I can comment on another point, if you allow oppression to occur in one context, it's just a matter of time where that oppression would repeat itself in another context. And I want to talk specifically with regard to the United States. During the Biden administration, we had enormous repression on freedom of speech with regard to Palestine activists. In my profession, particularly law school employers, the major law firms collectively sent out a letter to the deans of pretty much all of the law schools, telling them to inform their students that if they do not toe the line with regard to Israel and Palestine, not in so many words, but it was pretty clear, then their jobs would be in jeopardy. Come a year and a half later, Donald Trump turned against those very same law firms because they acted in the interest of democratic interests, the Democratic Party interest, and made them come down to their knees. And they now issued a letter, and the law school deans issued a letter in support of these law firms' freedom of speech. And a number of us responded that when it came to Palestinian and pro-Palestinian activist freedom of speech, you were willing to compromise. But when it came to your own freedom of speech, you elevated it as a supreme norm that needs to be protected. So that's absolutely correct. I mean, if you compromise on one instance, it's only a matter of time where that would boomerang and come to harm you. And we're seeing that in the United States. Action against Palestinian activists transcended both of the major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. They had consensus. But now what we have is the Republican Party coming after the Democratic Party activists, NGOs aligned to the Democratic Party's program, and stifling them in terms of their freedom of speech and the message that they send out. And that is a very interesting phenomenon.
Well, certainly, Prof. I know, obviously you need to leave in a few minutes. You do have an appointment in a few minutes, but we thank you. We say Jazakallah to you for taking time out and spending time with us right here on Salam Media this evening, inshallah. We wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, and my apologies for my internet problem. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Ziyaad Motala, who said they had to leave, but we will continue with Saleh Hijazi. Saleh, just obviously to, we are heading close to wrapping up the show. And I think what is important and what is extremely urgent and what is necessary at this point in time is we know that the world has actually mobilized, and particularly people on the ground. We've seen so much happen on the ground, cities, hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets, protesting as well. But just in your view, in your opinion, to stop this imperialist military and economic support to Israel, that would be a real test for these countries who are calling for Palestinian statehood. I think, yes, we seem to have lost Saleh Hijazi as well. We will just try and see if we can't get in touch with him. But I think, there we go. Saleh, sorry. I think we just lost you. I'm not too sure whether you heard the question, Saleh.
Yes, I have it. And a couple of important points to say here. One, that what has been making a difference, although unfortunately nothing is meeting what is required to end the genocide. And now for almost 2 years of live stream genocide that is only escalating. And you saw in your introduction, you spoke about the criminal famine that has been imposed on the people of Gaza by apartheid Israel. It's only escalating. And now with the invasion of Gaza and the further displacement again and again and again of the people in Gaza City and the north into the south, bombing them meanwhile and so on. So the genocide is escalating. But what has been making a difference is people power, people mobilizing on the streets, taking action to pressure their governments, to sanction Israel, taking action against companies that are complicit in Israel, taking action against cultural and academic institutions that are complicit in Israel. And we've seen over these past 2 years of genocide, Israel isolated at the grassroots and institutional level. We've seen an unprecedented level of academic boycott. For the first time in the colonial West, we have the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, which is one of Israel's staunchest allies, announced a full boycott of Israeli academic institutions and universities. We have now countries threatening to leave the Eurovision Song Contest in Europe because of participation of Israel. We've seen the Scottish Parliament pass a motion adopting the boycott, divestment and sanctions, and divesting from companies that have investments in Israel or companies that are complicit in Israel. So we're seeing people mobilizing to target this complicity and towards ending this complicity. Now, that said, the complicity still exists, and it is the only reason that Israel is able to continue on with this genocide. Now, we know that the policy in the US is not going to change, despite what the professor was pointing to, which is very right, that the views among the people in the US, including of Republicans and particularly of the young, are shifting, where you see a growing support for Palestinians and growing criticism of Israel, seeing Israel in a negative view. Still, the establishment and the US administration, it doesn't matter whether it is Trump or Biden, both of them have been staunch supporters of the genocide. That will continue, and the US will continue to send weapons. Over 90% of the weapons that Israel has been using against Palestinians in Gaza, and that will come from the US. But what we've seen people do is try to disrupt that complicity. And we've called for days of disruption starting on the 18th of September that have been ongoing really until now. We've seen massive, perhaps the biggest day of action since the beginning of the genocide. Unfortunately, I mean, I have to say since the beginning of the genocide that, in Italy, where there was a general strike and the closure of shops, of transport, of schools and universities and so on. It was a massive day of action yesterday in Italy to disrupt this complicity in genocide. This is what's needed. This is what's happening. And even when the US continues to send weapons, we have, and the professor alluded to this as well, the dock workers in the north of the Mediterranean, including in Spain, in Italy, in Athens, in Greece, and so on, that are refusing to handle the ships and the weapons that are going to Israel. We see municipalities, local government, and cities also take action to end complicity. So this is growing, and we need to continue, because it is only by people power and the pressure that is coming from the grassroots that we are able to create the change that we want, which is here to end the genocide and work towards dismantling Israel's settler colonial apartheid against all Palestinians.
Yes. But also, Saleh, I think the time has long passed now, because Palestinians are entitled to restitution of the whole of the land. And yeah, we're talking about pre-1948. We are talking about historic Palestine. And it is only historic Palestine, a one-state solution, that should be a realizable objective. And I just need a comment from you, because we see many Arab nations calling for a two-state solution. Last week, I hosted a discussion on what had taken place in Doha within a matter of a few days after the attack on Doha as well. 50-odd countries were able to mobilize, and it became somewhat of a speech contest, as one of my guests had actually put it. And once again, disappointment, because earlier on we spoke about the France-Saudi Arabia initiative as well, but just disappointment all round, where one finds that even Arab nations are endorsing what these colonialists, these European countries, are now starting to say and promote this whole idea of a two-state solution.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to also be very clear that the complicity in Israel's genocide, apartheid, and illegal occupation does not exist only in the colonial West. It does also exist in the global South, and there are some of these Arab countries and Muslim majority countries that are very complicit in Israel's systematic crimes, in its maintaining of this settler colonial apartheid regime. The Emirates, for example, that continues on its partnership and its alliance, military and security alliance with Israel, or Morocco, for example, that while the ports of the northern Mediterranean are closing down to the U.S. shipments of weapons, we still have the Moroccan ports open for these shipments that fuel the genocide with weapons and fuel. Israel still gets its majority of fuels from global South countries, including Nigeria, again, a member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, as well as Gabon and Azerbaijan, all members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that was meeting in Doha last week. And I want to say, it is only, we've heard only words until now, and repeatedly. This is the third, basically, Arab Islamic summit. There were two that were focused on Gaza. This one was focused on the aggression against Qatar. And all we've heard, as you say, context of words, despite actually, having the power of doing something that is, I don't want to say simple, but quite clear and direct, that could have massive consequences. Like, for example, closing your airspace and territorial waters to Israeli planes or planes and ships and transit that is going to Israel. Imagine what would be the effect of this very just small, non-aggressive form of action that Arab and Islamic countries will do. Israel will be completely isolated. It will not be able to get weapons or any support to continue in its genocide at all. And this is a simple action that they could take. They know they could take this, but they are not doing that. They're not doing that because they want to please the imperial US, the master in the region. And they're not doing that because many of them are complicit still in Israel's settler colonial regime of apartheid and genocide, and I've just named a few. And I want to go back to your first part of the question about how the Palestinians see this, and we continue to affirm, and we've done so very clearly in 2021 in what was called the Dignity and Unity Intifada, when Palestinians from across historic Palestine, as well as in the refugee camp, stood up to say that we are one people. Our land from the river to the sea is one land, and our struggle, despite its difference expression, is one struggle. And this oneness that was expressed in that intifada pre that genocide still remains the dominating sentiment among Palestinians, whether it is here in the occupied West Bank, it is in the refugee camps in forced exile, it is now in Gaza, or our brothers and sisters in the lands that are occupied in 1948.
Well, exactly, Saleh, and sadly, we've come to the end, but I think just finally, and, you can obviously comment, and I'm just looking at a comment that's come up on screen saying, good day, Inayet, Saleh, and Ziyaad. I am happy and proud that the 9 ASEAN member states of Brunei, Dar es Salaam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Timor, Leste, and Vietnam is included among the list of 158 UN member states that have recognized Palestine as an independent and sovereign state. And that's come through from Layman Labrador. Shukran for that comment. But Saleh, just finally, we still need to continue regardless. And I've been saying this over and over again. I've been repeating this like a stuck record, but it's important for us. As relentless, as brutal, as savage as this genocide has been, and also in terms of the settler colonialism, what is taking place in the West Bank. And we know one cannot exclude Jerusalem, one cannot exclude Al-Quds as well, the whole of Palestine. We need to be equally relentless. We cannot stop. We cannot allow fatigue to creep in. We need to continue raising our voices. We need to support the BDS movement. We need to continue isolating Israel. And this is exactly what we can do at this point in time, although we are just so far removed from where, the real genocide is taking place. But there's a lot that we can still continue doing.
Thank you, brother. Indeed, what must be done, what meaningful solidarity is the ending of complicity, the work to isolate Israel. And since we started talking about the state recognition, let me end with this. To all our brothers and sisters in South Africa and around the world, keep the measure of self-determination and the right of return as the center. And always measure this way. Are Palestinians closer to fulfilling and exercising fully the right to self-determination and the right of Palestinian refugees to return, or are we further away from that? This is the real measure, whether it is recognition, non-recognition, any political process. This is really what is at the center of our struggle, and we need to continue to have your support and meaningful solidarity.
Well, inshallah, you certainly have our support. And once again, Saleh, really appreciate you taking time out this evening with us right here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best, my brother, inshallah, and looking forward to future engagements. And once again, Jazakallah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Always an honor to be on Salam Media. Thank you very much. Thank you, brother.
Ali Hijazi with us this morning, joining us out of Ramallah this evening, and also early on, we had Professor Ziyaad Motala with us. And this brings us to the end of this evening's broadcast. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure being in the company of our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms of Salam Media. And once again, let us remember, Palestinian blood is not cheap. And that time has passed. And once again, we cannot allow the blood of Palestinians and their civilians that have been brutally murdered savagely by the IDF. And once again, one cannot buy into this fake recognition of what is called a Bantustan. And this will continue to strip Palestinians of their fundamental human rights, their rights to life, their right to dignity, their right to safety, their right to security, and their right to freedom. And with that, so those thoughts, I'll be signing off. Once again, an absolute pleasure being in your company from myself and the team at Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.